Welcome to Imperfect, Better After Broken, the show where we celebrate the cracks, the scars, and the stories that make us stronger. I'm Jeff Servello, a leadership coach by trade and an avid golfer by habit. And with me is my wonderful co-host, Dr. Susan Hendrich, a leadership coach, psychologist, and host of Human Being with Dr. Susan. You want to do that over?
No, it's perfect. I can't believe I did that to you. That is really embarrassing. And I am very excited about tonight's topic, Jeff.
Yeah, tonight's topic is exactly what we're doing right now, Kintsugi. We are taking something that was great, broken, and we're going to explore how rebuilding it and making it better is all part of the process based on the Japanese art of Kintsugi, where when pottery breaks, it doesn't get thrown away. Master craftsmen and artisans and even amateurs like us can try to repair the pottery using gold so that the cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted, and the break becomes part of the story. The repair is the art.
And the fact that you and I can laugh when we have the inevitable cracks in our pottery, we want to invite our listener to do the same thing, because life is about being a human, not being a perfect being, even though we strive for perfection, like you said last time. So this Kintsugi concept, beyond cool. Repairing better after broken.
I love it, and I'm loving live radio, so here we go. And our focus today is we're going to dig into what it looks like when leaders and organizations, they don't deny their fractures, but repair them with intention. Because the truth is, every leader and every organization has cracks. Every organization has been broken in some way. Every one of us as individuals fall short. We strive, or we don't make it to our target and we miss. So the question is, if something breaks, how do we repair it?
It's such a relief to know that being broken isn't the end, that coming to terms with the fact that we aren't perfect and we can never get there is not only a spiritual recognition and a little bit of a stoicism boost, but it is permission to experiment and have a growth mindset. So the first time I saw Kintsugi, I was in Japan. It was 2001. And there was this beautiful bowl sitting on a shelf, and it had lots of space around it in this gorgeous boutique on the 7th floor of a Japanese shopping mall. And it was perfectly gilded, but on the jagged edges of where the piece had been broken. And I went over, and in my broken Japanese, I asked the store clerk to explain, what is this piece? And she was telling me about Kintsugi, the idea of in the human condition, we break over and over again. And the trick is not to dwell in that brokenness or be down on ourselves because of that brokenness, but to acknowledge that as part of the human condition and use it to make our lives even better and to give others permission to do the same.
As you were talking about that, maybe it's because I just downloaded a couple episodes of the show Vikings, from image of a blacksmith at a forge, right? So it's heated, beaten around, cooled, heated again, right? The strengthening, the reshaping, the rebuilding, this idea of malleability, but also intentional creation, kind of running parallel with this Japanese art and the perfect cracks.
The perfect cracks. That's the parts of us that are broken, are the parts that we highlight for each other. Our inner strength, our inner warrior, and how we can conjure up that repair energy to get back up again. As the Japanese saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Finding that energy isn't always easy. So it's fun to, look at a piece of Kintsugi on the shelf and say, oh, isn't that nice? And boy, next time I break, I'm going to put myself back together beautifully like that. We know that it's not that simple, that the last thing we want to do when we are broken and we've fallen apart, and there we are on the floor exposed for all to see how broken we are, the last thing we are inclined to do is say, let me get some gold paint out and put myself back together. But if you can train your brain to have that readiness, know it's coming, anticipate it, embrace it, and activate that muscle, it becomes easier and easier every time to get back up.
Because they're master craftsmen, they make it look so seamless and beautiful. But I think anybody who's ever used Gorilla Glue probably has a really good idea of how hard it is to actually glue something back together, right? Or put a model together. You know, every time I take the Gorilla Glue out, I also get the bottle of rubbing alcohol out. So I'm getting my fingers unstuck. You become almost a craftsman of your own life, this rebuild process, getting better and better and more skilled at putting yourself back together or making the cracks more seamless.
Watching the Olympics these days, right? I'm fascinated by how these athletes are so focused on their craft that when they fall, when you see an ice skater or a snowboarder fall, they don't sit there and dwell on it. They get right back up. In fact, they train themselves to move forward as if it didn't happen, as if it were part of the choreography of the dance.
The Olympians are the perfect example of this. They've worked so hard. They've trained so hard to get somewhere. And maybe they do fall. Does that make them a failure? If so, how do they rebuild? Or how are they defining their success to begin with? How are you defining your outcomes so that if something doesn't go according to plan, you're set up to maybe work on the repair process? A little bit more about this repair process. And from your perspective as a psychologist, can you talk to us about what the repair process is, how this shows up at home, as a parent, maybe with our friends or in the workplace? And then we can talk about cracks, repair, how we can learn, how we can frame and support our friends. And I would love to, in a little bit, draw in this beautiful article you shared with me that you wrote earlier about your experience with your friend as well.
Okay, thinking about this process of activating Kintsugi, it always starts with a mindset. In fact, you right now can make a decision that you are going to install this capability of Kintsugi to become better after broken. You can make a decision right now that when you break, when you fall, when you slip, you are simply going to make a statement to yourself. This is part of the process. I feel freed when I think about incorporating an acknowledgement of the fall, the break, the slip as part of the process. Therefore, it doesn't become so shocking, so jarring, or off-putting when it happens. It's simply a step in the process. Babe Ruth struck out, I think, 1,330 times. And every time he struck out and a reporter would ask him, aren't you bummed out that, wow, you had a lot of strikeouts? In fact, he had some of the highest strikeout rate in the league at the time. And he said, no, I don't get upset when that happens. It just gets me that much closer to my next home run. So it starts in the mind, deciding that you want to incorporate a growth mindset, palms up, Kintsugi, repair into your regimen of life.
I love that the choice aspect that you're talking about, that this plays into the words we use with ourselves when we make mistakes. And I was thinking about Waze, the app. When you make a wrong turn, it doesn't say, hey, chucklehead, you missed your turn. It just says recalculating route, right? And what if we were that, I don't know, that kind, or maybe just sterile with ourselves? Instead of beating ourselves up about, hey, you're terrible, you stink, right? The language we use matters to us. You talked about that in last week's show about talking to ourselves in the third person. But instead of being like, oh, you suck, we bobbled the intro. Well, welcome to live radio, recalculating. We're back at it, right? Maybe we planned it, maybe we didn't. The listener will never know. You and I will know, but we recalculated. We kept going.
There's no point in dwelling on the broken part. Use it to get you recalculated to your next Waze route. That is so powerful. Although I would pay for an app perhaps that says, hey, chucklehead, just to surprise my husband when we're driving down the road and we make the wrong turn.
Yeah, that's got to be part of like the Samuel L. Jackson download where you can download his voice. But not to oversimplify it, there is an emotional aspect, right? Missing your turn may not be as emotional as getting fired or losing a loved one or having an accident of some sort. And I do think that that's part of the challenge, right? When we treat high potential employees like they're great until they aren't. We treat athletes like they're superstars until they aren't, right? Everybody loved Josh Allen until the Bills lost in the playoffs, and then you have all the talking heads on ESPN. Oh, we knew he was going to collapse. Did you though? Right? And we kind of, there is a little bit of a human element that happens. Can you talk a little bit about the human element and maybe some of how the pride in the fall impacts our ability to recover in the framing?
There's a recent documentary on Elway, John Elway, and
so good.
It's so good. And one of the reasons it's so, I recommend you watch it before it leaves Netflix, I think, that you hear these radio announcers or TV announcers, depending on how he's performing, claiming the momentum of how he's performing. Oh, we always knew he was going to be amazing. Well, we knew he was overrated. You know, no matter wherever he's going, people tend to follow that. So from a psychology point of view, it is so hard for us to fail. We talk about making it okay and safe for a child, for example, to try and fail, or that we want a workplace environment where everyone's voice matters and it's okay to speak up even if you get it wrong. We say these things, but our ego, our sense of self, so often is tied up in the latest performance that we often will ascribe worth as a human being to our last performance. Can you imagine if an Olympian were to do that? How much we would miss out if Thomas Edison gave up after his first failed experiment. The sense of self being vulnerably attached to latest performance is really a dangerous and unproductive affair. What if we instead recognized, again, Thomas Edison, well, that didn't work, on to the next one. Athlete, well, that was a swing and a miss, up to the next at bat. And if we could afford ourselves with that forward mindset, we would be letting go of where pride and narcissistic injury gets in the way of our being able to function. Why does that happen? Because our dorsal vagal system, if we want to really get fancy with polyvagal theory, our dorsal vagal,
let's go.
Let's nerd it all the way out. We go into fight, we go into flight, we go into freeze, or we fawn. Each of these ways of responding to a stressor is designed to protect us from the injury. And the problem is that we overuse these systems when the tiger isn't actually chasing us. It's simply, it wasn't my best presentation at the team meeting, or it wasn't my perfect parenting moment. And we start to make judgments about self. One of my favorite books, 13 Rules for Living by General Colin Powell. Never let your ego be so close to your position that if your position falls, your ego goes with it.
Ooh, so what I'm hearing is that there's identity involved in how you identify and the labels. So not only the words we use, but the labels we ascribe to ourselves. So instead of I'm a football player, I'm a father, I'm a person, I'm Jeff, and I play football, right? It's something I do, not something I am. Am I grabbing that right in terms of the role of identity?
Right. So right. And look at it on both ends of the spectrum. Don't get so caught up in defining oneself, yourself as a football player or as a project manager or a, the volleyball captain, whatever your title is. That on the good side, don't get too attached to it. And also on the negative or suffering side, if we assign ourselves with a label, I am a diabetic, I am a schizophrenic, I am an asthmatic, then we start to live into that identity as painted for self, and it becomes a rabbit hole that we go down. You are not an asthmatic, you are a person who has asthma. So that person first language, father, friend, who you are as a human being, these activities that you engage in or you surround yourself with are often transient. How many of the activities that you're doing today are the same activities you were doing when you were 12, 13, 26? Avoid assigning yourself a label, an identity according to activity, and go into your values. And that's where you define yourself.
I love that. Aside from playing bad golf, I can't think of very many things I'm doing now that I did when I was 12 or 13. That and maybe annoying my family, right? Like those are kind of consistent themes. That reminds me though of the work that Carol Dweck did. I wish I'd have read this when my kids were a little bit younger, right? When you compliment your kids or you praise people, praise them in terms of verbs, you put forth great effort as opposed to you're a great soccer player. Right? When you lose the game, that effort can still exist. But if you lose the game, then the greatness as a player maybe goes away. Or you're so pretty. Well, now I have some pimples. Am I still pretty? Maybe not. Then that collapses. Or I love the way you grinded out that report instead of you're so smart. So then if the grade doesn't come back.
Powerful stuff. If we really want to geek out and go back to Carl Jung, the great psychologist, and the concept of identity and self, you've just perfectly nailed it. That beware that within us is the yin and the yang, the animus and the anima. But within us is the darkness and the light. Yeah. And when we try to distance ourselves from the darkness, it will always catch us and find us. When we try to over-identify with the light, that and not allow room for the darkness or the fall, the failure, we set up an unattainable ideal that will eventually cause us to crash. You talked about you're so pretty. Now I have a couple blemishes. What does that mean? I remember when I first started practicing psychology, I was focusing on teenagers. I had a large private practice where we focused on adolescents. And I cannot tell you how many kids would come in and they would tell a story about one incident that happened, one blemish that they found, one missed basketball shot, and they genuinely believed that their life was over. I am guilty. I remember my own teen years. And part of that, James Garbarino, who's the great identity researcher and psychologist, he talked about how identity formation happens in stages and it requires time to percolate and think about, incorporate mistakes and triumphs, failures and new skills to come out of that identity development stage with a stable sense of self. And if we get stuck on one snag, we're in trouble.
Two practical tips that we can offer the listener right now is, one, maybe there's no such thing as a mistake. There's just unintended outcomes. If I knew I was going to crash the car, would I really have taken the turn that fast? Probably not. If I knew that answering the question the way I did was going to make my loved one upset, would I have said what I said? Probably not, right? I think we all can relate to that moment where it sounded a lot better in my head than it did when it came out of my mouth. Right? You know, how's this look? Husbands don't answer that, right? That's a trap, right? If I knew it was going to have the outcome that it did, I wouldn't have done it unless I'm some sort of sociopath. And then I think the other practical application is the words we use matter. How we label the things in our life matters. I don't have anxiety. I'm feeling anxious, right? It's temporal. It's passing. I have asthma, not I am asthmatic. The way we're talking about it and how we're using it gives ourselves room to grow, gives ourselves room maybe for some gold fill to come in.
That's grace, Jeff, isn't it? That's grace. If we can afford that to others. And you brought up a crucial element of grace, has to do with the transience of our failings. I found a Bible verse I wanted to share that I thought was really relevant with Kintsugi. Do you mind if I share that right now?
I would love if you did, please.
Okay, so Psalm 34:18. God is close to the brokenhearted. You know, you think of the prodigal son or you know, the healing, the worst among us, the leper colonies and all of these broken individuals are loved just as much, if not afforded even more grace because of their brokenness. So allowing for that grace to be one's whole self, even when broken, and the transience of most of our brokenness. Most of the time when we fall down, it's seconds before we get up. You will rise. And in fact, you will tell that story. It will become a part of you. Find me one TED Talk, find me one superhero that doesn't have an element of brokenness, total devastation in their story. They don't exist.
No. And they all talk about how the process wasn't what they wanted, but coming out the other end stronger was worth the pain they went through. And, you know, and it reminds me of Saint Dismas, the repentant criminal on the cross next to Jesus. Whatever he did, bad enough to get him there. But he's not remembered for whatever his crime was. He's remembered for asking, Jesus, remember me. Even then, whatever he did was so bad that it landed him there. This is a kazoo moment. Not to make light of the crucifixion, but to remind us of the temporal nature. For all of us who have bottomed out at some point or had that dark moment, if kazoo could just pop up, or a friend could pop up, or a loved one could pop up, your guardian angel pops up and whispers in your ear, you got this, it's okay. The best is yet to come. Back to your quote.
And wasn't it Winston Churchill who said, if you're going through hell, keep going?
Yeah.
The temporal nature of suffering. We get stuck in neural pathways that we dig that say, I'm always going to be I am depressed, as if I define depression in the dictionary, or I am a failure. No, you're in a transient, a temporal moment where things are not going your way. I used to live in Wichita, Kansas, and I cannot believe the amount of wind on the plains. It's beautiful. And there's no sunset like a Kansas sunset, but there's also no wind like a Kansas wind. And so I found myself at the university talking to a fellow academician and saying, this weather, how do you deal with this? We're both East Coasters. How do you deal with this hot, blazing sun and dust, everywhere? And he said, here's the thing about Kansas. If you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes. I thought, oh man, that's such a great way of thinking about it. And then I moved to Florida after that. And guess what people said about the weather in Florida? If you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes. So no matter where you are, no matter what's happening around you, if you can wait a little bit of time. What did you say last time? The amount of time that the human body takes to experience a feeling?
It's about 6 seconds, give or take.
Hang in there. This too shall pass, said Julian of Norwich.
Have I ever told you about my friend Kevin Bull?
No.
When I was in college, I worked with the Navy football team. I was one of the equipment guys. I love Navy football. I grew up an actual fan of Navy football. I would have loved to have played, wasn't very good, wasn't in the cards. So I did the next best thing. I worked with the football team. And Kevin Bull was the head equipment manager. So he was the civilian in charge of running everything. If you've ever seen NCIS, he was kind of like Gibbs-esque. Wise beyond measure, memorable, larger than life, great smile, and always imparting wisdom. And one day I messed something up. And he held me accountable. I was really upset with myself that I had messed this thing up. And he looked at me and he just goes, look, man, it's not how bad you mess up, it's how well you recover. And tomorrow you'll do better and you'll earn your way back to where you were. That was like my first real life practical example with Kintsugi. Something in my plan was faulty. I got an outcome I didn't intend for. I had to face the consequences, but Kevin showed me the grace of giving me an opportunity to repair. But really the best part of the grace was showing me a path to recovery was possible. That was the first time I can really think of in a professional setting where I really had somebody explain to me, like, the recovery matters. It wasn't just penance. It was about growing and building up.
You're talking about that story right now, and the recovery is the story. We don't even know, listening to that story, what you messed up. I don't care what you messed up. Kevin didn't care what you messed up. What he cared about is how you showed up the next day. So do you mind me asking, how did your relationship with him and your experience with him go after that moment?
I'm not going to say I was Denozo-esque, but I stepped in it frequently, and he frequently kind of gave me the metaphorical tap in the head to get back in line. There was incredibly high standards. And so you were encouraged to meet or exceed. And when you didn't meet those standards, you were never cast away. There was not this zero defect mentality. It was, how do we learn? How do we grow? How do we iterate? This is the standard. It wasn't, Jeff, you suck. Nate, you suck. Will, you suck. It was, this is what was expected. Did you meet it or not? And if you didn't, fix it, learn from it, don't make the same mistake again. So it was very empowering. I learned a lot of stuff at the Naval Academy. That was the thing, not in a leadership classroom, not in a physics classroom, not in the leadership laboratory. I learned it on the football field from a guy making sure that the whole operation ran smoothly, a behind the scenes facilitator. And it really taught me probably the most important leadership lesson of my career.
The best leadership experience I ever had, you just triggered it. Do you see my goosebumps right now? I'm thinking about this moment. After I messed up, I don't remember what the mess up was. Again, it doesn't matter what the mess up was. I came back the next day and I remember sitting in my office and cowering like a baby turtle because I was sure, since I'd messed up the day before, and my boss did the same exact thing you just described, where here are the standards, you didn't meet that standard. And did I mess up on purpose? Absolutely not. Am I ever going to let that happen again? No way. But still, I felt as though you're only as good as your last gig, and my last gig was a crash and burn. So I sat in my office, and down the hall comes the boss, and he knocks on the door. Hey, good morning. We're gonna go across campus, and we're gonna take a walk. Do you want to join us? And I remember thinking, I'm still a member of this flock. You haven't flicked me to the curb. That day, I learned later, he intentionally brought me back into the fold to say, you're one of us, you're good enough. Like, that was he never said that out loud, but I came out and I put my raincoat on because it was pouring rain, and we went for this walk, and he patted me on the shoulder once. Never talked about that incident again. It was that one pat on the shoulder that told me, you're still part of this club. You still matter. You're still good enough. And from that day on, I said, I am always going to do this. If I ever have the privilege of leading others, when they mess up is the most important time for you to show your leadership skills. And I am always going to let people know that they still matter immediately after the mess up, because that's the most important time when they feel most vulnerable. Yeah. So thanks to Kevin, and thanks to my boss.
The leadership connection to parenthood.
Say more.
So I have a really good friend who I got his permission to tell this story. His son was trying to stick up for a friend. In the process of it, how he went about sticking up for his friend was suboptimal. And it led to him getting suspended from school and losing leadership positions in clubs and stuff. And that young man experienced the self-isolation that we all feel when we feel like we've messed up or stepped in it, and we get in trouble or are admonished. The leadership that person's father and mother showed, reminding them, you are loved. That was not your intended consequence. But life still has outcomes and unintended consequences, right? Think about the person who spills their coffee, runs the light, hits the person in the crosswalk. Did they mean to do it? No. Is the person in the crosswalk any less hurt? No. And putting those pieces together. But they helped their son reframe, recontextualize, and build forward by asking him, how are you going to choose to let this define you? Are you going to take control, or are you going to give up control? Are you a person who stepped in it, or are you a person who learned from their experience? And it was just so powerful to watch. The pain and suffering was still there, but to watch this young man go through the process, to watch the parents navigate the process, right? The agony of your kid suffering. And if only I'd have parented stronger or better or this or that. But now to hear them as a family talk about it, it's a lesson that brought them together as parents and child. And that young man is now more resilient, more capable, more durable from having gone through that and having been provided the contextualization and kind of the bringing back into the flock that you just described and experienced from your coworker there. Like, okay, we're gonna let you sit with it a little bit because that's where the learning happens, but we still love you. You're still part of the team. You're still part of the family.
Redemption.
Yeah.
First of all, standing up for a friend is noble intent to have. And often it's not our what, it's our how. It's not our why, it's our way that gets us in trouble. How brave of him and his parents being able to navigate through this together. There's a concept that is a game changer for me. It's called the second arrow.
Okay.
The first arrow is that you messed up. That's in the books. There is nothing that can be done about it. The shame, the exposure, the oh, I wish I could take that back, you know. And in this age, thank goodness there were not cell phones and you know, recording devices readily available in the days where I was growing up. I don't know about you, but I'm just glad there's no evidence of some of the stuff that I messed up. But anyway, don't pull from your quiver a second arrow and shoot yourself by how you respond. So those parents, by allowing their son to experience that mistake, but still be loved and challenge him really with an invitation to say, okay, there's your first arrow. What are you going to do moving forward? Are you going to aim that second arrow at yourself, or are you going to aim it forward and take on the world? And that moment means a lot. We're always watching how people are responding. A toddler, you know, breaks something. First thing they're going to do is look at their parents. How much, you know, am I in big trouble or is that okay? And how parents respond matters. And it teaches us as children, what does that mean in the world when we mess up? Redemption.
Yeah, and how poignant the response, right? The reaction might be to pull the arrow. The reaction might be to yell, "What are you doing? What happened?" Right? Like to vent your frustration. But when you can contain that, manage that 6-second emotion and respond deliberately and not shoot the second arrow, that's so powerful. Is there an example maybe from a professional setting where you've seen this pop up, where people have either received the second arrow or professionally made a mistake, or there was an error and they were given grace?
I'm proud to say that I have had the opportunity to offer many promotions in my career, and it's such a joy to see people moving forward with their career. And moving forward doesn't always mean moving up any kind of a ladder. Sometimes the lateral moves are the ones that are the most powerful and the most empowering. Not one person that I have promoted or coached who has become promoted did not have part of their story some epic failure from which they were able to recover. But it is an unconscious test that the world offers. And when people choose that second arrow and they choose to aim it forward to go on with their lives, it's a test of mettle, and it's a proving point moment to say, this will not break me. This will not take my sense of agency and ability to succeed. So in the business world, but I would also say in your community club or in your family, when there is a breakage, when there is a fall down, train yourself to say, it's time for the second arrow. What am I going to do with it? Invariably with some sort of blemish, some sort of flaw. When you think about the best boss you've ever had, the best inspiration, that really shaped who you are as a leader. Can you conjure that person in your mind?
Yep, I got a pretty good idea of who it is.
Did they have perfection? Like, were they totally perfect in all ways and like unblemished in how they conducted themselves or how they took on the world?
Not at all.
So you can think of a not so perfect element of that person. And does that not so perfect element of this person that you're thinking about make them any less valuable a teacher to you, or any less high impact in terms of modeling whatever it is that you admire about them?
I would say it would if they did not take accountability and engage in repair like you had talked about.
Mm.
So they practice what the guys from Bob Does Sports, another podcast I listen to occasionally, would refer to as hand up accountability, right? Hey, that one was on me. And instead of saying sorry, they do something that's really cool. This particular person, I don't know who she might be, but this particular person will say, it's you, by the way. This particular person would say, hey, I could have done better, and this is what I'll do next time. And then what a great way to model accountability, that step forward, right? I'm not taking the second arrow. I'm getting the glue out, and I'm going to put the thing back together. And this is how I plan on putting it back together.
Bob Does Sports. I think that's like the #1 podcast right now. I think Mel Robbins and he are like.
Are they up there?
Yeah,
I didn't know
there.
if it was them or like us or Sean Ryan's show or Joe Rogan. Right? We're on our way.
Like, share, and comment, please.
There's 27 followers right now. You could be number 30. Let's go.
Right.
Drive to 100.
Build it up, man.
Yes.
Hands up accountability. May we always have that. And you know what, Jeff? That's one of the things I dig about you and what makes you credible as a leader to me. When I hear people talking about you as a coach, there's two elements of your excellence as a coach. One of them is your expertise, which carries gravitas and credibility. You know the theory, and you've read the books, you've listened to the podcast, you've written the lead model for leadership, an expert in your field. That's one element of what I hear about you. The powerful second punch that comes with your leadership is your empathy. And the empathy that you have can only come from a willingness to look in the mirror at one's own misgivings or less than perfect moments. When in doubt, go to your core values. And chances are that's where you'll meet the other person sitting across from you, no matter how frustrated you are with them. You're brilliant. Yes, you have awesome command of leadership theory and things like that. But what I watch you do as a leader is in that empathy.
I appreciate that. I do. I've gotten it wrong a lot. There are many a times that I grabbed the second, third, fourth, fifth arrow and shot all of them. And I'm not proud of it, but it's stuff that taught me. And I think that a lot of leaders and people who are listening to this, hopefully, if they're honest with themselves, will relate to the fact that sometimes we just get so lost in the emotion and the passion and the pressure of what we're doing, whether it's internally imposed pressure or externally imposed pressure, that we forget to respond and we only react. And that emotion then, right, vents out. That, am I yelling at my kid because I'm mad? Or is it my emotions, my fear, my sorrow, my whatever? Is that really the best way I want to handle that? Am I admonishing this employee, right? Is Sally from accounting getting the third or fourth arrow? Does the spreadsheet error deserve that? Or is there a question I could ask that builds trust and help leads to that, right? One of my favorite questions, right? What were you hoping to accomplish?
Powerful.
Could always jump off the top rope later at somebody, but it's hard to get curious after you've been really judgmental. And I think that hinders the repair process.
obscures the forward motion if we're focused on the infraction itself. I have a friend, Chris, who often would say, when I have an employee who's struggling, I try my best to stay curious a little longer. Because judgment is such an automatic reaction. I love your distinction between reaction and response. Let's break down those two words. Reaction is Newton's law, right? Equal and opposite. Eye for an eye. You insult me, I'm going to fire back at you, right? Reaction. Response, respond is about pondering, respond, thinking before you spout off. And we can get really good at this, avoiding reaction and focusing on a response, or even being more proactive and having a strategy for how you're going to deal with it when the invariable mistake happens. I want to be known as a family member, as a wife, as a church member, as an employee, as a colleague, as a boss. I want to be known as someone who thinks when something goes wrong, when somebody makes a mistake, who thinks first and shows up with curiosity. And then together we face the problem. Here's a tip. Get on the same side of the table with the other person. Attack the problem, not the person.
Yeah. And even if the person is the problem, separate the individual out from it.
From their behavior.
Yeah. I have something, not I am something. This person has a problem. They are not the problem. If you do this right, it really can build trust. It can strengthen your family. It can strengthen your organization. You can even be mid-reaction, catch yourself and choose to respond and be like, I'm sorry. Allow me to start over. I am starting to handle that poorly and you deserve better. Will you give me the grace to start again? Like, it doesn't have to be either or, right? You don't have to smash everything to pieces or glue it all together in the same moment. You can kind of realize less than beautiful version of Kintsugi, and those of us who are like gorilla gluing things, you can recognize that handle's not going to go back together completely right now. Let me stop instead of making it worse, reassess, and then be more deliberate.
The emphasis is not on returning to pre-break condition.
Oh, what a great call out.
It is on transformed condition. Transformational leaders change you. They don't pull you back to before you made a mistake. Perfectionism is such a waste of life's energy, holding back in fear that I can't move forward unless I have this perfect. That's why I flail my arms forward in life these days. When I finally figured out what it means to be a leader, it's about going forward, knowing you're going to make a mistake and having that toolkit ready to take the hit and bounce. Hands up accountability. I love that. I'm going to borrow that. Another verse that was powerful for me. It's 2 Corinthians 12:9. Weakness becomes the place where strength is revealed.
I love that. To be able to find that place, name the break or name the weakness, own the responsibility, and share what's going to change or what is changing. This once was this cup. It looked like this. You can see where it broke. See how it's now it's my fault. I knocked it over. But now look at how it's been put back together.
Even more beautiful. Autobiography in 5 short chapters by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. May we give ourselves the grace to keep moving forward.
So, Susan, you said earlier, you talked about Winston Churchill's quote, right? If you're going through hell, just keep going. And it reminded me of any good epic road trip needs a soundtrack.
I hear that.
We're going to provide you a soundtrack to your journey. So if you are going through hell, or you're in the process of re-gluing pieces of yourself back together, we want to offer you your very own Kintsugi leadership playlist. We're going to put this in show notes. It'll be available on our social media channels. But for phase 1, for the break, where we're going to acknowledge fracture and loss, we open up with the man, the myth, the legend, Johnny Cash and Hurt.
The Man in Black. Oh, Hurt. Boy, what a ghostly, beautiful song. So you said the first phase of Kintsugi is the break. Johnny Cash and his song Hurt. Late in his career too, right?
Yeah, late in his career. Don't Follow by Alice in Chains. I'm Still Fine by the Red Clay Strays.
Boy, that gets me.
Big shout out to Three Doors Down and the recent passing of their lead singer, Here Without You. My first deployment in the Navy, Three Doors Down, was very big. Their album, Away from the Sun, that was probably the soundtrack to that deployment for me. And Here Without You was a powerful song for my new bride and I as we were separated.
We all have a soundtrack to when we broke. I'm certain that somebody out there can remember the song that they played over and over again during that first heartbreak or as they're getting back up again. So very cool songs for phase 1 of Kintsugi, the break. What's phase 2?
Phase 2 is reflection and meaning making. You've acknowledged the break, and now you're kind of sorting through the pieces. What does it mean? Can I build it back? How can I build it back? What's happening? And it leads off with none other than Ramble On by Led Zeppelin.
In other words, I'm not permanently broken. Maybe I can take the second arrow and do something productive with it. Ramble On. How about another one?
With a tip of the cap to the fact that the repair process is not always speedy. And it's a process. It's a journey. Hell of a Year by Parker McCollum.
I like the mix.
We'll pair that up with Wake Me Up When September Ends by Green Day.
Phase 3 is rebuilding and growth. So now you've taken a look at all the pieces that have fallen around you. You've made your assessment and you've decided that you're going to put yourself together and you're going to transform and you're going to go forward. Jeff, give us some songs for that rebuilding and growth phase of Kintsugi.
My favorite song in this phase is Starting Over by Chris Stapleton. Whether it's a mild rebrand of identity, a major life shift, or a full body off rebuild, Starting Over by Chris Stapleton has just enough upbeat, just enough reflection. I think it's really great to focus you. Up there with Walk by the Foo Fighters. And if some of your rebuilding is happening in the gym, Rise Above This by Seether or Stronger by Kanye West. A tip of the cap to My Gator in Gainesville. I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty has to be on this list.
What's that last phase, Jeff, for Kintsugi?
So that last phase, phase 4, strength, purpose, and integration.
So you find yourself rebuilding and putting yourself back together. You're looking down at these gold stripes that you've earned from putting yourself back together.
Battle scars, one might say.
Oh, snap. And strength, purpose, and integration. Build back stronger, better after broken. What songs do we put in that one?
So I'm a girl dad, so you got to lead off with Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. That's it. You just got to shake it off. Even though you're a girl dad, you're still a dad. Or you just like a strong guitar riff, Back in Black by AC/DC.
One of my faves.
If you want to be really upbeat, How Good Is That by Old Dominion, which is just a positive, upbeat song about finding the upside How are you going to use this? Reminding yourself, right? How good is that song on the radio? How good is that top-down summer night? It's reminding yourself to savor the goodness, because even though you're in a rebuild and you maybe have felt sad, and a lot of people with depression will talk about the duality of, I'm supposed to be broken. I have this wonderful moment. Can those two coexist? And the answer is yes. The final song, Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
Get back up. Jeff, Kintsugi, the process of rebuilding and being more beautiful in the broken places is a key to good living, especially after the hard times. I am so glad that we spent this time talking about Kintsugi, and I'm hoping, in fact, a double dog dare for our listener. Put a comment in with your song to build back.
I love it.
After broken. I want to hear your playlist of songs that you use to repair with gold.
And this week, I want to invite you to do one additional thing. Have a repair conversation you've been avoiding. Instead of reacting, choose to respond. Build instead of casting off, because sometimes the most beautiful things emerge when you choose to restore what might have otherwise been destroyed. Saint Padre Pio, my favorite saint, is known for saying, "Blessed is the crisis that made you grow, the fall that made you look to heaven, and the problem that made you seek God." And whether you're spiritual or not, I think we all can find beauty in recognizing that perfection is a myth. Brokenness is not the end. It's often the beginning of something extraordinary.
I want to thank you for going on this journey with me today, Jeff, and allowing me to join you in your journey of Kintsugi, Better After Broken. Thanks for tuning in to imPERFECT, Better After Broken with Jeff Servello and Susan Hendrich. We want you to come back next week right here on Sandcastle Radio, America's hottest online variety and music station. Number 2 in the books. Woo-hoo.
Awesome.
Hey, can we do a high five?
Oh, hold on.
Come do
Hold on. Sorry. I had a mat here, so I was centered. Here we go. You ready?
Okay. High five. True.
We'll work on it.
If we reach one person with something to make them think a little more gently about themselves, give a little more grace, we've made a difference.
That's it. Anything other than my wife listening is bonus.
And I only had to pay my husband Tom $1 this time, so we'll see. Take that out. Oh my God.
Kind of show where we run in here.
Woo! Keep it cool, Suze.